on the All In Network. It's the Real to Real, the Jump Off, with your host, Walt the Damager and Rob Cooper Jr. Music by DNA Beats. And now, All In Politics.
Welcome to All In Politics. What's going on? It's Rob at Rob Cooper Jr. on Instagram, not Twitter. I'm joined today by Mr. Tim from IMT. Welcome back, Tim.
Hey, thank you. I try to keep off of Twitter as much as possible too.
Well, it's always good to communicate, and I'm so happy that we have this platform, All In Politics, that we can actually get out our information unfiltered, uninterrupted, and we own it. So it's always good to be able to give you something that is opposite of what you're getting on a daily basis from what I like to call corporate media. There's no such thing as left wing media. There's no such thing as right wing media. It's all corporate media. And folks, the sooner you figure that out, the better we will all come to an understanding of how politics works and how those who create the narratives want you to think. But I'm brought here today with Tim from IMT, International Marxist Tendencies, and we'll have an opportunity for him to talk about that organization. But I also want to give a shout out to Walter Damager, who's unable to join us this afternoon on our podcast. But Walt will be back better, stronger than ever on our next one. Couple things though, Tim. I wanted to first of all see how you doing, man. I know it's been a while since we talked. Man, it's great that we're catching up.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we're getting a chance to do the podcast again. I really enjoyed the last two times I was here, and both been quite busy, but making time to get back together, it's been too long.
Yeah, so last time we were on, and if we're just going to kind of pick up where we were at, we talked about the working class, and when Tim is on, we always want to make that focus. We want to make the focus on the working class, and let me just kind of throw out the parameters out there as I just did my taxes, and by no means am I anywhere in the bracket other than in the working class. In fact, I will say this: that if you are making under $1 billion, you, my friend, are in the working class. Yes, that means if you're making $999 million, you, my friend, are in the working class. The only time you can get out of that working class is once you hit that $1 billion. You become a billionaire because that's when you hit that level where you are the shot caller and you don't take any shots from anybody. And the reason why I bring that up is because I want to start out when we talk about the working class. I want to talk about the NFL. Because the reason and why so someone will say, well, why are you going to the NFL where these guys are making millions of dollars? The owners are making are billionaires and the players are millionaires. Why are we going to the NFL? Well, in my opinion, I believe that the NFL is a microcosm of what capitalism and what is wrong with capitalism, how it is displayed in America, in here in America. And as we come up on the eve of the Super Bowl, which will be broadcast next Sunday, we have the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, which actually should be a pretty good Super Bowl on the field. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'll leave that to All In Sports Talk with Elijah Cooper when they have their conversations to really go into the details about the sports aspect of it. But what I want to talk about is the business aspect of it and the social justice aspect of the NFL. While the NFL is kind of, they position themselves as a organization that promotes social justice, an organization that promotes fair play. I believe one of the things that the NFL has, they call themselves parity, or any given Sunday, any team can win. But where we don't see parity are in key positions, and I'm mainly talking two in particular. Number one, when it comes to coaching, and number two, when it comes to quarterbacking. Um, I think the NFL has a black quarterback problem and they have a black coach problem. Um, it always seems when you have qualified coaches out there like Eric Bieniemy, and some of the other coaches, Brian Leftwich, the folks that name to name a few who've gone to numerous Super Bowls as assistant coaches, they always seem to be overlooked when it comes to getting the head honcho job. And then you go down to the level of the players piece. When you look at Antonio Brown, now I don't want to get into details about. I've heard things on social media about mental health and all that. I'm not qualified to talk about that. But what I did see is a man who walked off the field, which is oddly enough is really consistent to what we're seeing right now in corporate America right now. I think and you guys can Google it. Google an article. I believe there was an article out in November where I believe a record number of people have walked off their jobs, have left their jobs. So that's no different than what Antonio Brown did. So I think we have to understand what's going on. And I think the NFL is a perfect kind of example of what is going on here in America. And finally, we just heard this week Brian Flores, who's a former head coach of the Miami Dolphins. I believe he ended his season winning 7 straight games, I believe, on a winning streak. He gets fired. I've never heard that in my life. Never heard of anyone who finished the season on a 2-game winning streak, let alone a 7-game winning streak, get fired. And then it comes out not only is he fired, but he then sues the NFL because of unfair labor practices and discrimination against African American coaches. But he also said that the owner allegedly offered to pay him $100,000 to purposely lose games. So right there, now we have an issue with integrity. Sound familiar though? Tim, let's talk about this, man. You know, we're not just talking about the NFL, but let's talk about capitalism in general, where folks are being paid to lose games. And I'm gonna go a step further. You think this doesn't happen in real life? Well, let's talk to some of the farmers out there, where the government literally pays them not to grow crops. Oh, we going in today. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot there, and I think the corruption. I'm sure we just sort of get to the surface of what goes on. I mean, there's a lot of money at stake, and if there's a lot of money at stake, there's plenty of backroom dealings and corruption and paying coaches to lose. I wanted to go back to what you said at the beginning though, because there are some misconceptions, I think, even with people who would call themselves socialist, even that if you make a certain amount of money above like an arbitrary line, that you're no longer working class, or you make 6 figures, you're not a true worker. And I think that kind of misses the point about you selling your labor for another person's profit. And the players of the NFL certainly, I would say, do that. If you're a big star, you can capitalize off of your brand basically. But the majority of the players, you would know the numbers better than me, but don't make too much. And the average career of a player is very short.
That's right.
So if you and coming out of that, I'm sure they can live quite comfortably, most of them, but I mean, I would still say they are very exploited, like any worker under capitalism. And I believe their contracts can be cut at any time, like these
Mhm.
contracts. So you know, the power is very much in the employer court over the employee. I think you can look at all the hallmarks of sort of the worker capitalist dichotomy, the antagonism there between players and owners and players and teams, and especially since players are basically, you know, you have a monetary value on like human life and the human body, and you know I think the percentage of players that have is it CTE are like is like in the 90 percentile.
Right, right.
um that's ridiculous. That's incredibly brutal. And so these people are basically selling their bodies, and it's basically commodification of human beings, which is another quintessential part of capitalism. Is if you're a worker selling your labor, you are by definition, in the eyes of capital, a commodity to be used and profited off of. So
You
uh,
know, yeah, great point on that. When you're selling your bodies and selling your time, for labor. Just even talking a little bit about Antonio Brown. Let's going back into
yeah,
his situation. Allegedly, again, these are all allegations, and I'm sure these things will be sorted out. But he allegedly told his coach. His coach asked him to go back into the game, and he told the coach that he wasn't feeling well. He was hurt. He was coming off an injury. That is a fact. And he said, he wasn't feeling well enough to go into the game. And the coach said, "Hey, if you don't go into the game, you're gut. You're
yeah,
gone. You or we don't use you." And that's what he said sparked his walk off. Well, that sounds familiar. When the pandemic first started, this go all you got to do is go to your local meat packing firm, where folks, you had a, "Hey boss, I can't pack meat today because I got, I have a cough, or I'm not feeling so well and I have a fever. I don't care. We got to get this meat out. We got to get this production up." You get your behind to work. And then what
yeah.
happens? You have an outbreak at many of the meat factories. And again, we constantly see these unfair labor practices, all the way through. Yeah, we all see it every
You
Sunday on the NFL, but very little folks. What we want to bring the attention to is what you don't see, what happens right up the street from you.
Yeah, and you talked about coaches or owners paying coaches. The Tyson meat plant, uh, the tech, the executives of that plant were taking bets over how many of their workers were going to die from coronavirus.
Wow.
Just incredibly evil stuff. And again, just I'm the NFL, I'm sure, has some. Well, we had the bounty system way back that guy got the Saints got caught with,
Right.
paying people to bruise people, but and it's just as kind of wicked there. But to the labor shortage, I think a lot of people are getting fed up and just realizing that you know our the exploitation of the working class is becoming more and more apparent to people, either in their individual life or kind of in general with all these headlines. And you're having bosses being like, "I don't care if your dad is vulnerable to the virus, and that you live with him and care for him. I need you to come in. I don't care that you're sick, you need to come into work." You had people, I remember in the summer of 2020 when we had just started our first lockdown, where the talking heads on the news were talking, like, "Oh well, your grandmother would want to die for the economy." We're like literally the message coming out of like,
Right, right,
give your life
right.
to to the numbers so that they are green and go up. And well, giving your life for profit for the capitalists. And people are sort of not just on a life-threatening level, but just completely overworked. The CDC comes in like, "Oh, just kidding, it's 14 days, 10 days. Oh, actually it's 5 days. Never mind." A Delta CEO wrote us a letter complaining that they needed to get their workforce back to work quicker. The science tells us it's 5 days all of a sudden, and you need to get back to work. And that's sort of been the message this entire pandemic is like, um, we can't extend healthcare. We can't do any sort of really meaningful systemic response to this pandemic, but you will be going back to work all the time. So I think that people sort of this pandemic sort of um, sparked this movement. We had Striketober, uh, where there's a kind of a wave of strikes and more strikes than anything I remember in my lifetime really. Um, but 30 years is really nothing compared to the history of the American labor movement. But I think we're just starting to see inklings of people kind of becoming class conscious, honestly. And there's a bunch of unionization drives. There's a bunch of just mass walk-offs, which shows you sort of how kind of disorganized the working class is in this country. We don't really have any institutions of our own, whether that union membership is really dwindled in the last few decades, and the union leadership is not really sending the message they could. I mean, if they wanted to, and they wanted to kind of step in front of this movement, they could really take it in a very exciting direction. They're not doing that. They're sort of you know uh, more just like keep it calm, kind of classic class collaborationist labor movement. But I think is yeah, it's this sort of beginning. I think that I'm really excited to see where it goes, and it's not all organizing though. I think it sometimes comes down to just like individual realizations, like Antonio Brown was like, you go into work and it's just like, wow, this literally want to work me, to the point that like I can seriously get hurt in his case, or like they really don't care about me as a person. I'm a tool to them. I'm something that it's another resource that they've bought to make profit from. And I think Antonio probably, he didn't suddenly get zapped with a bunch of Marxist theory about Marxist economics. He
Right.
had it in his
Right.
normal everyday life of like realization, and stepped out. And I honestly, good for him.
That's a great point that you just made regarding how things were revealed to Antonio Brown all of a sudden, and I forget, it was someone who said it. And you may know who better than I do, but a wise man said that um, everyone is pretty much a socialist. However, they don't know until they get whacked in the head with a police baton, and then they realize that they are a socialist and they are a Marxist. But hey, you're listening to All In Politics. I'm at Rob Cooper, along with my guest host today, Tim from IMT. Our host, Walt the Damager, is off today. We hope that he will be back with us on our next show. But I just want to tell you that we have tons of content. If you like All In Politics, you're definitely going to you like All In Sports, but just go over to our YouTube channel. It's the All In Network YouTube channel. Again, that's where you get to see Elijah and Mike do their thing. Their forte is with the NBA starting to heat up and some trade talks getting ready to happen. You want to make sure that you get their analysis of that. They give you some extra analysis. Where is Ben Simmons going? I don't know. I just hope that the Sixers move him as quick as possible. But you're going to get that information on All In Sports on the All In Network. And when you get to the YouTube channel, not only do I want you to like this program, I want you to like their programs, but the most important piece that my man Walt the Damager will tell you is to jump up, do a 360-degree slam dunk, and smash that like button. Smash that like button. All In Politics again with my name is Rob at Rob Cooper, along with Tim from IMT. And Tim, let's talk a little bit down back to the working class. Let's talk about some of the solutions, man. What are some of the solutions to the problems of working America that IMT has put out there and has been really sounding the pulpit for several years right now?
In the short term, I think to encourage and build on this labor movement, like I said, a lot of the action right now is very spontaneous and individualized. People just quitting, which is basically the only lever of power they feel they have is to just up and leave. And that's not the case if you're a member of any organized labor, if labor is organized, right? If you're a member of a union or a party of some sort, you have a lot more leverage through collective action. So I'm very encouraged with sort of, like I was talking about, the growing unionization efforts, the growing strike movements. And so that's where to start with, like where we are now. The easy answer to that is socialist revolution and overthrow of capital. That, how we get there is and we have to start with where we are. We have to work with reality. So I would say workers learning to organize and learning to work together and challenge capital, even if it means minor concessions, is the way to start. Through organizing and winning, and through class struggle is how the working class learns to be conscious of itself as a class, learns to understand their power in the economy, and also learns how to work together to start managing and controlling society, which is how it would be under socialism. And so, it's all part of a process and a learning experience that we're going to go through together. And so that's where to start. And to bring it back to the NFL, I know I should know sort of the state of like unionization in pro sports. But I don't NFL players don't have any sort of
No,
union, right?
they
Not at
they
all.
actually they have the NFLPA, but it's I will say this: out of all of the major sports, they probably have the weakest um,
Yeah.
union when it comes to all professional sports. And let me just go into that a little bit. I'm glad you brought that up. Again, this is all my opinion, but I what I see just from observation, observing them and the basketball players. I'll just use Ben Simmons as an example. Although I don't agree. I think Ben Simmons is dead wrong what he's doing and how he's going about things, but that's all because he is a beneficiary of a strong union, and he was able to tell his employers, say, "Hey, listen, I have some mental health issues. I don't feel right playing for the Philadelphia 76ers right now, and I don't want to play in Philadelphia anymore. I have some anxieties when I step on the court, and these are all kind of valid pieces. Again, I don't necessarily agree with the position that he took, but they're all valid points. But and the Philadelphia 76ers are exercising their right, and by finding, I believe I saw something where he's paying, in the upwards from 17 to 19 million dollars in fine. So that's a choice that he's made. Well, NFL, on the other hand, if he was in the NFL, he would just get cut because they
Yeah.
don't have any
Yep.
guaranteed contracts, if they get
Exactly.
hurt or anything like that. So, and I'll tell you, I would say this: the players have no one to blame but themselves. They had a couple of lockouts and they had a couple strikes, some in the 80s, 90s, and I think some even in the 2000s. And the players were always they always got thirsty, man, and would cross the picket line,
Yeah.
to work for their bosses. And they always end up getting a raw deal. Whereas the NBA, I think when they had a lockout, LeBron and some other players, they went and started their own league.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so it was drawing sellout crowds. You know what I mean? So the NBA was like, hey, these guys are on the ball, so we gotta come to their terms. You know what I mean? So the NFL definitely, the players definitely have themselves to blame. I'm also going to say this is probably why you see so much nepotism going on. I think McVay, I think he's a son or grandson of a NFL coach or something like that. I mean, you just see these guys coming in. You see these guys are like third string quarterbacks. When you see them getting in the game, man, they can't throw 5 yards. Well, they're not there because of their
Yeah.
talent. Those guys are there to vote with the bosses whenever time the collective
Yeah.
bargaining agreements come in.
Yeah.
So they come in, they stack the deck. Sound familiar? Sound like sounds familiar? What's
Yeah.
going on in our political process, you guys? That's why I'm so glad that we, and this is a conversation that I haven't heard, on any of the airways. I haven't heard any podcasts, but I said, it's time to have this discussion to really look at the NFL as a microcosm of what's really going on here in America, man.
Yeah, I don't think the NFL could get away with anything close to what it does as far as player injury, as far as the firing and labor practices. I don't think they would have dared to tell Antonio Brown to go back to work, basically, despite being hurt. And I think these are all these things are all symptomatic of a lack of um,
Hmm.
leverage and labor power, the power of the players in the league. And as a Marxist, I always want to put things in a historical context. It's crucial, and I would be really curious to sort of look at the history of how the NFL sort of developed into what it is today, and how that reflects in their lack of any sort of labor rights and labor power in the league. I'm willing to bet that racism has a huge part to play with it.
Right, right, right,
Um,
right.
uh, it's always a tool to divide the working class based on race, to limit their you know coming together and collective action. It's a tale as old. It's a tool as old as the capital.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm that we can talk about like the you know rampant racism in the league, but I'm sure that has a lot is a very powerful tool in the hands of the owners to discipline the players and discipline any collective action before it even gets off the ground.
Right. And and I hope, folks who are listening today, I don't want you guys to get the message that we're crying over a few millionaires. Um, because that's not the point here. And you're not getting the point. What we're trying to convey to you is we're telling you what's going on in the NFL is really happening to you. And it's their way of kind of telling that story. I was joking with someone, and actually it was Walter Damager and I were talking about this. And I said the NFL, kind of replaced the chessboard in the medieval times when the elite used to play with us like pawns on the chessboard before they made their moves in real life. Well, that's the same thing that's happening here. It's kind of like a laboratory. It's like a
It is the
test.
gladiator fights
Yes,
of
right,
modern
right,
modern
right, right.
United States.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And it's ritual. I mean, I'm not trying to spook anybody out, but it's on Sundays. You know what I mean? It essentially replaced church. So the NFL figured, the rich figured that that they had a good business going with the churches for a while there. I guess they figured the church thing is not good business. I think folks are kind of leaving the churches in droves. So I guess they figured in the last 30 years they would utilize their time on Sunday afternoon to drill in the evils of capitalism for 3 hours, from one between the hours of 1 to 4. But it's the same thing. It's the same things that's happening. And again, I'll admit I'm not going to come out and try to be a hypocrite, but I probably will be watching the Super Bowl next week. You know what I mean? But unless there's some type of collective blackout or boycott, I will most certainly participate in that. But I will not be watching Sean Carter's production since he decided that we're beyond kneeling. I'm going to say I'm beyond his nonsense, and I won't be watching the halftime festivity or freak show that they'll be putting on. But I won't lie, I probably will dip in and watch the game as long as it's competitive. But Tim, man, it's always great, man. I really appreciate you joining us. Any final thoughts?
Just to sort of, I think it's a really interesting topic to look more into. I mean, between how the NFL is sort of a little like microcosm of a lot of the patterns we see in capitalism. I mean, you can look at how NFL stadiums are financed and how much public money goes into that, and basically how the state is always very happy to subsidize capital and those who own it. And hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of public dollars go into these stadiums, and there's never money for healthcare or
Right.
even how expensive free COVID tests would be. There's never enough money for the working class, but there's when a billionaire says, "Hey, I want to build a stadium," the state says, "Yes, please take my money." I think you can look at sort of the marriage between the NFL and the United States military is also a very interesting aspect of how capital is supported by the state. And and also sort of the sort of masks that the NFL likes to put on to like show that they're progressive, either pink apparel for breast cancer awareness. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think any of that
No.
money goes to actual breast cancer. um it's always like this kind of we are progressive on the face of things, but if you just like scratch the surface, it's nothing but profit and exploitation, and glorification of military might, and every just it like you said, just a lot to look into. I think it's an amazing sort of symptom of American capitalism, kind of all put together. And like you said, I'm a big Eagles fan. I'm gonna watch the Super Bowl. It's a it's like on a moral way, it's a very love hate relationship, but I think more power to the players over the owners, and um, you know just if yeah I think if you want to,
Yeah,
if you're annoyed with what like the NFL does, and you can look beyond it and realize that a lot of those patterns are what we deal with every day in our life.
that's right. And just like McDonald's, I think they're dead wrong in their practices as well. But every now and then, I may have a fish sandwich. Probably
Yeah,
more from there.
exactly, exactly.
Well, again, man, it's great chatting with you. And folks, if you would, give us your thoughts on the NFL. Do you believe that it's a microcosm of our society today or not? I want you to, when you like this video, we also want you to comment, and we definitely want to keep this discussion going on.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I guess to
but
say, if you are looking to if you're tired of capitalism, or you're looking for what an alternative or how we move beyond it, check out socialistrevolution.org. It's the American branch of the International Marxist Tendency, and yeah, come visit the website and give it a read.
yes, that's socialistrevolution.org. I'm gonna tell you, you go to that site, and just gonna use the term that the kids, you guys, you young guys, Tim will say, it's fire. So make sure you get make sure that you hit that link, and we'll add that link to our YouTube page as well. Well, again, thank you guys for listening. This has been All In Politics. I'm at Rob Cooper Jr. on Instagram, not Twitter. And also my man, Walt the Damager. Get well, my friend. And Tim, thank you once again. Have a
Anytime.
good evening.